Hi, welcome to the limited audio series, St. Louis Suffragists Today, an LWVSTL production and an effort by the League of Women Voters of Metro St. Louis to share the stories of our St. Louis League leaders. I am Angie Dunlap, current president of the League of Women Voters of Metro St. Louis. These audio recordings bring you a series of interviews with longtime leaguers. This project accompanies the book Raising Our Voices by Nicole Evelina. Thank you for joining us. In 2020, the League of Women Voters celebrated their 100-year anniversary. We want to honor the women whose shoulders we stand on. The reality of women's rights today was enabled by the women in our past. The oral histories of League leaders can inspire our work today for voters. These longtime leaguers were and are making a difference in our community. Today, you will hear Louise Wilkerson interview League leader Debby Howard. Debby is a 50-year League member who has served the League in multiple roles over the years. I am thankful for Debby's expertise in parliamentary procedure and applying Robert's Rules of Order. Just this summer at National Convention, the LWV showed how to decide things in a civil manner as we used these rules to pass a controversial change to our national bylaws with only 12 votes to spare. League members from across the country were digging through Robert's rules to see if there was a way to challenge or to revote. It was really quite dramatic to see if the change would stand, and I got to be a part of it since I went to National Convention. Only because of the League do I know anything about running a business meeting. Now here is the interview of Debby Howard.
The first question is, do you recall when you joined the League and why?
Well, it was back in 1970, and I had just got back to St. Louis from Youngstown, and they asked me, so I joined.
Okay. Didn't you tell me at one time that your mother was quite an active member of the League?
She was very active, and she wanted me to join again, too.
Why were you willing to join again?
Basically, even when I was a kid, I helped stuff envelopes and do things at the League office. It was such a big part of my mom's life, and she wanted it to be part of my life. I liked the people who were in it, and they wanting me to do things, and they put me on the board right away. So
that had to be inspiring, I think, to be young and be put on the board right away. That was a big deal, I'm sure.
I don't know that I had that much to offer at that point, but they wanted, so they said, we're making a position for you on the board.
They wanted your youthful perspective, I'm sure.
Yeah, that was part of it.
Tell me now, why is the League important to you?
I think it does a lot for the community. I think the friendships that you make are so important. It's a nice vehicle for broadening your horizons of people that you know and work with. It's certainly, you learn a lot being a member of the League. Like now I do a lot of parliamentary procedure. I learned that from being in the League. Going to conventions was truly educational.
Yes, I do know parliamentary procedures because I don't know what we would have done without you at the state conventions and so forth. You've just been an invaluable resource.
But I learned it from being in the League. I never would have known it otherwise. At my first League convention, my mouth was practically open the whole time, thinking, oh my gosh, these ladies really know how to use Robert's Rules.
As a League leader, what was the most challenging thing you faced?
Well, there were a lot of different challenges. Getting people to get along, that's one thing. When you're the leader, you have to be sure that everybody is part of the conversation, and some people don't want to be. As far as projects go, during the DSEG, we were asked to monitor the public schools for the committee that was overseeing the judge's order didn't have enough people to monitor all the schools. So I had to select 20 League people that I thought would be able to do the job. And we helped do all this. I think I got at least 20 volunteers so we could go in, and we were given a set of questions by the committee and things that we were supposed to be observing for the court. We did that for a school year. So that was quite a lot of tourism, but we were honored to be asked, and I think we did a good job.
So that was at the beginning of the court order desegregation grant.
Seeing how the desegregation was working out, and now it was just in St. Louis public. Of course, when I was president, it was just the St. Louis League. We weren't joined with the county league yet.
Did the volunteers have to go into the schools and into principals and teachers?
Yep. We didn't go in pairs. We just went because there weren't enough people for us to go in pairs.
Because the school district was quite large at that time.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's why the committee needed help, because they didn't have enough people that they could have gone to every single school. We were assisting them to get into these schools. And it was interesting. We were well received, and we heard a lot of the teachers' complaints and the principals, and it was very educational.
Yes, that was a very important job that you did for the community. That was awesome.
It was a challenge for the schools to be in compliance with the court order. I think it helped having someone from the outside come in and say, this is what's going on, how's it working out? And then we would take our reports back, how it was working and everything.
And it helped inform
the judge. That's what he wanted, the report. So you had inside people there at the schools. Now it was just one visit. Sometimes we went back to a school. We all went to different schools.
Great. Operationally speaking, in terms of the internal workings of the league, were there any controversial operational issues that you managed?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I was either president, but one of those offices when we were discussing the abortion issue. And the league never came out in favor of abortion. They came out in favor of a woman's right to choose. The wording and the intent were very important there, because St. Louis at that time, one of our members was a group of nuns. They joined the St. Louis League, one membership.
Oh, I see.
And they were in favor of choice, but not anything that would be pro-abortion. So that's why we said, no, the league would not be taking a position for or against abortion, but the woman should have the right to choose. And so then they voted to support the right to choose, which we thought was interesting, because of course, the Catholic Church was not in any way supportive of a woman's right to choose at that point.
Yeah, that was interesting.
That's why I remember it, because it was different. And then we did lose members over that issue. Now it was worded, it was that we were not in favor of abortion, but we did support a woman's right to choose.
That's an interesting dilemma. About when was that, Debbie? Was it in the 70s or 80s?
You'd have to look back in the league history. This was when National went ahead and they took on the position of supporting the woman's right to choose. It was probably 80s or 90s, whenever that issue. It was when everybody was talking about it and doing things.
Okay, so now that was a very important public policy issue in terms of how the league office operated and who did what and how it was done. How did you manage those challenges?
The St. Louis League, when I was the president, had a secretary, a paid secretary. So I had a lot of help. I didn't do it all by myself. Of course, the board always has been active with league. The league boards are always working boards. Our secretary, Mabel, she knew everybody and she kept the membership records and she did all the filing. Our files were in beautiful order. But of course, during my term of office, we did join offices together, because at that time, when we had our first joint office on Delmar, then our secretary retired. State had a secretary, and then it was called the Information Service. At that time, it was called CERC. And then there was the Metro League. That was because we were an ILO, with the city and the county had an ILO, interleague organization, which was called Metro. So we had a Metropolitan Finance Campaign, because we all worked together to raise money. And then there was the Metro League, and then there was the CERC, and there was St. Louis and State. So there were 5 entities.
Oh my goodness.
St. Louis County League, I guess it merged at that time, or maybe not. Maybe it was just Metro was in there. But anyway, there were at least 5 entities in the office. I didn't coordinate it. Mickey Hall coordinated it, but I was one of the entities.
Is that about when the state board's office functions were joined with the Metro St. Louis League's office functions?
No, Metro and State had shared an office out on Woodson Road before St. Louis joined in sharing an office with them. They'd been sharing an office for several years out on Woodson Road. Anyway, we all decided that this was our first really big joint office, was in U City with all the leagues in the area.
And that was on Delmar?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So you talked about the woman's right to choose issue.
Yeah, and desegregation.
Yeah, desegregation. That was decided by the federal court. But how did most of the league members feel about the desegregation program?
They were all in favor that it had to happen. Like the county, they all joined voluntarily because they didn't want to have court-ordered desegregation and court-ordered busing, which they saw St. Louis struggling with. We were the poster child for what not to do. The county leagues, I'm sure, supported their school districts in their decision to accept the bus children.
As I remember, the alternative was, and I think the court had mentioned this, court was threatening to combine all the districts with the St. Louis City School District, and so they didn't want that. Were there any other important public policy and legislative issues the league tackled during your time as a leader?
We had one issue where we were working with the St. Louis city government to make the civil service for all the city employees and help them get a raise. We got a success on that, and they liked us for that.
Yes. My mother worked for the city, and I'm sure she liked you too at that time. It was very important, though.
And then we always, when the hospital wanted to take more of Forest Park for their expansion, we opposed that.
Barnes Hospital. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, the parking garage, the far south one, and then it's got that park over it. That was all part of Forest Park. They got that, but they wanted to come across Kings Highway, build across the highway. We said no.
I'm glad you said no.
There's all parts of the park that people were picking away, like when they built Highway 40. Now part of the park's on the other side of Highway 40 where that turtle park is. But before 40, that was all Forest Park. So we lost some parts there. It's always been a fight to keep people from stealing piece off of Forest Park. The league has always had the position that they want to preserve the park and not give it up to a development.
Absolutely. I'm glad the league was there.
We did a lot. We did work on national items. International trade was a very big issue with the St. Louis League. We worked with the county on that too. They had a trade fair showing all the things from Missouri that were exported and imported, so that people realize the importance of international trade to St. Louis and Missouri. That was a little before my time, but I heard all about it.
I'm sure you did. So, Debbie, as we know, the suffragists founded the League. And as we recognize the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, we noted at that time, and still note, that for decades, minority women were put into separate divisions within local leagues back then. They were not part of the main body. Do you recall any efforts to diversify the league's membership when you were a leader?
As long as I've been a member of the league, we have always had minority members, and there was always at least one minority member on the board. When I was president, Ida West came in with a whole group of young Black women who were just awesome, and they all went on the board. So we had a truly integrated board. But before that, of course, everyone knows the story of Mrs. Gellhorn at the Chase, and they were having a meeting, and there was one woman with the group, and they said she'd have to use the service elevator, and Mrs. Gellhorn said, then we will all use the service elevator. And so they did. But again, when I was a president, the league had a lot of party women that were involved in the league and on the board. It was good, very good.
Yes, I would say it was good and very good. That's great.
I did a research for one of the anniversaries, and I found in the early St. Louis history, there was a thing for the colored women's group raised a certain amount of money for the national convention. So there was always a Black membership in the St. Louis League from the beginning. Now, as you said, at that point, they were segregated, but in St. Louis, not for long.
We know that the league is nonpartisan. Were you ever hamstrung by the nonpartisan status that we have to maintain? Were you ever accused as being overly liberal or overly progressive in terms of the league's policies and positions?
No, not really. When we talk to people, the one side would say, oh, you're all Democrats. The other side say, oh, they're all Republicans. When I was president, the board was really split 50-50. The league always wanted you to work for your party. You just couldn't do partisan politics as a league person. As an individual, you were supposed to get out there and vote and support. But no, there's always issues with the nonpartisanship. And we lose members because of our nonpartisanship, because people want to support or oppose the candidate and they want the league to. And no, we can't do that. During my term of leadership, of organizations like NOW and the Women's Political Caucus took off because women wanted to be in organizations that could support candidates. So we lost some members to those organizations. That's always hard, but it is what it is.
True, true. As we know, men can now be league members, and they have been able to be league members for a long time, for several decades. Do you recall men who contributed significantly to the league's work?
Okay, the St. Louis League never got any really active men involved, but I know that the State League had a treasurer who was a man. I think he came from the Webster League, so he'd been active in the Webster League before he became state treasurer. But of course, back in my age, a lot of the husbands supported their wives with money and behind the scenes kind of thing, but they didn't join per se. That's how I remember anyway. People went by Mrs. John Smith and Mrs. Tom Jones. It was a different age.
Well, as we know, the political climate has changed in the nation over the years. How do you think those changes have affected the league's work, if at all?
I think the league's work has been affected because when the league was first formed, they were the only organization that was trying to educate citizens, and especially women, on how to vote, what the issues were. And now there are one issue organizations, there are tons and tons of organizations that do similar things to what the league is doing in certain areas. Now, nobody's ever really replaced the league as far as champion voters, although there are other organizations that get out the vote and that kind of thing. I think the changing world has forced the league to focus on where we really fit in and how we can really be an impact, because like an environment is a very big issue with the league, but we don't have anywhere near the impact on environmental issues as other groups do, because it's not our focus. It's an important issue, but it's not our focus.
Not our sole focus.
Of course, social issues have been important to the league. There's a lot of social issues that we really care about. But again, there are other groups that have more of an impact in some ways than the league does. The only place where we out impact other organizations is in voters' rights and voting reform, at least in my opinion.
I understand. Debby, as you look to the future, what changes do you foresee for the league?
I know the National has made some very big changes in the structure for the league, which will make an impact on how we do things, I think. And hopefully will still be a grassroots. I like that the league has always worked from the bottom up, not from the top down. I hope that stays the same. I think it's most effective that way, because if you come to a top-down organization, then you just become like financial supporters and not active. And the league members have always wanted to be active on the ground and going to rallies and lobbying in Jefferson City and in City Hall. And so I hope that doesn't change, but it might. I don't know.
I hope it doesn't change either, because that's a very effective approach.
I agree. But as I said, I don't know, with all the new technical, like you and I, we're having this interview on Zoom, as far as how technology is going to impact how the league does things. Unfortunately, we have older generation, and if we don't get tech savvy, the internet, the social media, I don't know how social media is going to affect the league.
We're already in it.
Yeah, but if we'll be able to attract the younger generation to the league.
Yeah, that is a concern. Debby, did I miss anything you'd like to share?
I don't know what more you need. The league has evolved. We went from, there were like 10 leagues in St. Louis, and now we're down to one league, and we're all working together. But it's hard to keep people involved sometimes. At least our membership is growing again, because when my mother was in the league, there were like 4,000 members just in the St. Louis league, plus all down in the county. As I said, all these other groups came, and people wanted to be in groups that were supporting candidates and doing things differently than how the league does them. I think we're evolving into an organization that still matters and still contributes greatly to the community. I think we have a ways to go, but I hope the league stays around, because especially with the political climate today, I think the league stands for civility and promotes civil political discourse, which is very hard to come by today. I hope we can make this an impact on the community, that this is the way you should discuss politics.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Louise Wilkerson, your interviewer, and it has been my pleasure and honor to interview Debby Howard, one of our most important leaders, and she's been a longtime league member since 1970, and it has just been a treat.
Welcome back. I think it is interesting that in these hyper-partisan times, that Debby said that the league always wanted our members to work for their party, but just not as a league person. The league does sometimes get judged as being pro-Democrat, but the league did not and does not endorse candidates or parties. This has not changed. We do happen to have progressive stances on several issues, but that is not partisan. Debby also helped me think about our work today in a different way. In the past, the League was one of only a few organizations that brought nonpartisan information about social issues to voters. Today, there are many organizations that do this with a focus on a single issue. Issues like the environment, education, guns, abortion, etc. It seems that more groups are imitating what the League has done since its beginning. They're digging deeper to understand the causes of problems. This has always been a goal of the League. More groups are trying to understand the effects that public policy decisions will have on communities and on individuals who have been unfairly left out. Still today, few organizations are a champion for the freedom to vote like the League of Women Voters. Thank you for listening today. Thank you to our LWVSTL Centennial Committee, who worked many hours to honor the suffragists of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Come back to hear even more about the League's past and present. This oral history was made possible through the generous donations of League members. It's produced by Cindy Lenz and Angie Dunlap. Thanks again for listening and have a great day.